All right, let's get up to the first slide. All right, so I'm Rob Fraser. I'm a scientist, and I spent most of my career really deciphering the mechanisms of disease and understanding the functions at the molecular level of biology. And I recognized very early on when I was one of the lucky ones who got to see the Human Genome Sciences database early on and use it as a tool to identify new targets for drug discovery and development. But very early on, we realized, wow, genetic sequencing is great. We can get all these associations and so on, but you got to get right down to the function. And to do that, you got to express the proteins, and you got to look at what is really active from a biological level. So back in 2011, I teamed up with a bunch of scientists and top physicians at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And we decided to combine our knowledge and come up with a way that we could better manage health, better treat people, and think about them more holistically rather than just about the disease. And so we formed this thing called the Personalized Medicine Initiative. And with the concept that let's not just treat the disease, let's treat the whole individual. And that led us down a road, well, what information do we need in order to do that? Do we need genetics? Do we need the epigenetics? Do we need the microbiome? Do we need proteome metabolome, lab tests, all of these things? And they all give us information, but when you put them all together, that's a $2,000 to $4,000 ask. Even it's probably got a lot cheaper since 10 years, 15 years ago. But we really found what was most actionable was the protein in the metabolome. And the reason was because that was what's happening in the individual at that point in time. And they're dynamic markers. And so when you have dynamic markers, you can see where you are at the start of something, you get that baseline, and when you have that intervention, you can see if you've made those corrections and actually follow to see if those corrections or those interventions have worked. And I shared this story with you earlier, so I don't need to go into it too deeply, but I think it really points to the power of longitudinal monitoring using these tools where you can see, well, here's somebody who's very healthy, but over time, things can happen, and these dynamic markers can pick that up. A genetic risk can't pick that up. You wouldn't know when that's going to happen. You wouldn't know when to manage that patient, but this gives you real time right now on how to act. And then for a practitioner, they know how to take it to the clinical step. Our role is picking it up early. Your role as practitioners is to take care of it. I touched base on this executive in his 40s. He was a bit of a party animal. I left that part out. And because he was a bit of a party animal, he actually was very concerned about his health and his liver particularly. But he went to the doctors, had the standard lab tests, and we all know what they are, but they didn't really show anything unusual. And yet he didn't feel quite right, and he wanted to understand. So he did his molecular U, and we actually identified that there were a number of risks. In particular, his liver needed some attention. And so he's now changing his lifestyle further and addressing this. I'll give you a couple more examples. This is a woman in her 80s, and she described herself as being stiff and achy. Her practitioner said, oh, that's old age, that's what happens, and we'll do some tests just to see if we can pick anything up, and they did not. She ran her molecular U, and we were able to see that there was an autoimmune activity that was pointing, in our case, from our analysis, to rheumatoid arthritis. Turned out it was an autoimmune disease. She took this information back to her practitioner. They tested for autoantibodies, and in fact, she was experiencing rheumatoid arthritis at its earlier stages. I think this is one of the more important ones that we've started to look at, though. The firefighters are frontline workers defending us against this changing environment where we're seeing more and more fires. We ourselves that live near or in those areas are also being exposed to these things. And these effluents that are coming out of these wildfires are actually having profound effects. And this is why, again, it's important to look at the dynamic markers, because we have to adapt to our environment, and we have to understand how well we're adapting to our environment. And you can see that in this case, a firefighter feels great, and this guy looks great. He is a fit firefighter. He works out every day. He's at a very high risk for depression, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and even worse, he's got some cancer risks. And these cancer risks, we have to now monitor and make sure that this neoplasia does not go to a point beyond. So we retest, we identify, and this is one, we talked about this earlier, about the concept of, is this a practitioner who should be administering this, or should it be a direct-to-consumer? So in this case, it was a direct-to-consumer. we're looking at these cancer risks. We have to talk to his doctor. We can't share that with him. So we're trying to work this out. We need to come up with a method of when we have these early methods of detecting cancer, how do we get it into the system? And so this is a big challenge for us, and that's something we're working very hard on. And then we like to joke about our CEO. So I was the original CEO, and I brought Jim in as a consultant. Jim Keane is our CEO. And when we joined, he was the picture of health. But after a few trips, the stress of the job, we started to see some of his biomarkers starting to shift. The good news is that he's changed his diet back to where it was. He's doing his exercises again. We're getting him off the hook on some of the travel, and he's feeling a lot better. And we've demonstrated, and we've published this, that you can change your health in as little as 100 days. With a 50% improvement by following these lifestyle action plans, individuals showed with a 50% with p-values, not crazy, but better than 0.05. Now, one of the things that you probably experience, because in the longevity clinics, there are a lot of healthy people. They kind of self-select. They're concerned about their health. So they want to not only be healthy and avoid those chronic conditions, they also want to get better. And we feel that with these biomarkers, not only are we able to see what is at risk, but how can you get better? And if you're training and you're working out, are you overtraining? Are you injuring yourself? We can help with that information, give that to the practitioner that can share it with the individual, or give it directly to the individual. So now we're with these new, as I mentioned, we're using large language models so we can get into these different verticals and customize it so that whatever that vertical is, that information can be packaged in a way that it's most useful to them. And in this case, health was important, performance is important, and recovery. You want to make sure that after you've trained hard, you can recover. But we're also getting into population analytics so that you in these value-based health systems, you can start to claim, yes, my patients are getting better. Here's my population analytics. Or I look at my population and say, okay, these guys are looking pretty good. This guy I need to see right away. I'm going to prioritize them. So it helps you with your practice. We also see long-term that'll be helping with the payers so that they can see what's going on in a population so they know exactly where to put their resources or spend their money. So when you're working with particularly in these value-based healthcare systems, that population analytics, being able to see disease before it happens, it becomes very powerful. Now, I mentioned early on the panel how we do this. So what we do a lot of machine learning, multivariate analysis that help us identify those key biomarkers that we've identified through our world literature that are really important for certain conditions. And this really helps us validate what's in the literature to what we're able to demonstrate with our samples. This is an individual. These were 56 individuals that we ran against age match, gender match, and we were able to get an accuracy of 0.98. And the reason is because we're looking at those key biological processes that we know drive those inflammatory, like oxidative stress, issues with insulin sensitivity, vasoconstrictiveness, that have that assault on the central nervous system, neurotransmitter metabolism, even certain microbiome metabolites can affect it. To start to drive the formation of the plaque. So now when we see those processes starting to be disrupted early on, we can do something about it. In fact, what was really fascinating is we start to work with clinics in Florida, that a dementia clinic, we could start to stratify the population based on what was driving the condition. The advantage to the practitioner now is they know what kind of health plan they need to come up with for each of these individuals rather than trying to do everything. So it gets much more efficient. We're starting to get more into predictive prescribing, and in collaboration with the University of McGill, we've demonstrated that we're able to identify with fairly good accuracy. We were looking to refine this a little bit more, but would first run through, we had a 67% predictive value for those that were going to develop rheumatoid arthritis post-immunotherapy, and then those that were not, we had 100%. We could predict who was not going to get it. And then for inflammatory bowel disease, we're a little bit better on looking at who would be affected. And we've gone back and forth on the unaffected. We actually found a few more that were affected than the doctors had in their scores. So how do we do this? So we've selected mass spectrometry as our tool. Now, mass spectrometry is a wonderful tool because it allows you to do absolute quantitation. There's no amplification of signal. There's no interfering. We don't concentrate anything. Everything is measured, but the sensitivity of these instruments allow us to get to femtomolar concentrations. They also allow us to multiplex so that everything that we measure is being measured at the same time. And so you're not doing an immunoassay here and a PCR assay here. You're getting everything on the same assay, so you're comparing apples to apples. All of that, and we've run our assays now in a COLA certified environment out of Irvine, Texas, and Irvine, California, and we are ISO certified, which allows us to go into every other part of the world. The big key is making sense of it. So we've developed the algorithms and the tools that really allow individuals to see and understand what's going on and know what to do about it. So there's 21 biological pathways. Some of these you recognize, some of these you won't. There'll be a quiz at the end, so I'll give you a moment to write your favorite ones down. But the key here is that this gets us down to what's really driving disease. When these pathways get perturbed, that's when things happen. And so if we can understand the root cause, then we can get ahead of disease. We roll up these pathways into what are those health risks, those key health risks, so which of the pathways are perturbed, what can they lead to, what drives them. And this gives us a comprehensive analysis. It really covers most of the chronic conditions that you'll see within your practice. And we can also do very well on a number of cancers. And we've made some remarkable inroads in non-small cell lung carcinoma and melanoma, early detection. The really exciting thing, though, is you only need one vial of blood. On average, for all of the conditions that we measure, we have about an 88% predictive value, as calculated by our ROC curves. Currently, we're at 288, and we're going to be at 1,000, and plus the 21 biological pathways, we have 12 biological pathways. Now, I know there's a lot of skepticism because we've seen this movie before. We're a pretty qualified team. Jim's our CEO, great experience both in the digital health space, and then Gene, our CTO. But really, the science foundational side, as I mentioned before, these guys are world leaders, and they put their reputation is on the line here. So this isn't about just a high school graduate who had a really great idea. This is about scientists that have been at it for many years. Combined, we have over 1,000 publications. The other thing where we differ from Elizabeth is that we actually talk about it. We'll show you what we're doing. We spent a lot of time going through all the world's literature, identifying those key biomarkers that give us those early insights, and then take all that information and put it into our platform and make sure all those algorithms are working. We do put the I in AI. We do have all of this supervised. We know AI is an amazing tool, but you need to understand that it makes mistakes, and the people that can understand that are the people that are studying this area. We're very excited about our roadmap. We're going to be at 1120, we're adding 400 key proteins, again, all multiplexed on the same platforms for a single vial of blood. In fact, for the proteome, we only need 10 microliters of plasma, so it's a very sensitive system. The chipset that we're expanding in is primarily to enhance and get more into the stratification of other conditions that we're already measuring, but also to expand into new cancers that we're not currently able to measure. And to bring in the gut microbiome metabolites, we're finding that one of the most interesting parts about our the holistic looking at health is that the microbiome is clearly playing a role. But is it playing a role by the population, or is it playing a role by what it's producing and what's entering into our blood? We think it's what's entering in our blood, and that's what we're focused on. We've had a good year. We became first in the Digital Prize for Longevity last year at Health. Jim was featured in Forbes describing his journey going from Wellness FX, which is a bit like the pre-runner to Function, which is repackaging Quest, into what we're doing now, which is a novel technology getting ahead of disease, not just using diagnostics in a different way. And then we've been identified by Fast Company as a company to watch. It's not easy. There's a lot of logistics involved, and so I don't want you to spend too much time focusing on this, but I do want to stress that one of the keys to our success in being able to predict is that we do require that an individual is fasted overnight and that they do not exercise, because the metabolome is a very sensitive instrument, and if you don't do that, you will get wildly different results. Then we also, because the metabolome is quite sensitive, we have to keep things frozen, and so we have to organize this cold chain logistics that'll really keep everything working. We're getting some good traction. We primarily work with clinics like yours, concierge, but we're also getting a lot of interest in the gyms, and we think that they can also be partners with concierge, because the things that they're encouraging are very much in line with what you're doing. Now, right now we retail with practitioners at one office 700, but we do large volume discounts, and if people pre-buy, we can do better. But we're comparable to most tests, and when you do per analyte, it's actually much more affordable. But the real cost savings is picking up disease before it's symptomatic. That's really where the savings are, because as disease progresses, as we all know, it gets more and more expensive for everybody. We ourselves are expanding. We're getting a lot of interest internationally. From here, I'm going to Europe to meet with some labs that are interested in running our assay in Europe, and then from there, I go to Korea. We're working with other resellers like functional fitness. We are getting into life insurance, because if we can keep people healthy longer, the life insurance also wins. It's a win-win situation. And we're starting to get in these verticals with specialty clinics. For autism, we have a signature that is about 99% accurate. For the group we tested, and I recognize that autism is not a single condition, it is a spectrum, but we have the tools that help us understand and stratify those populations. We also are getting into combining genotyping with our phenotyping technologies with rare diseases, which we're very excited about. So another area which I think is one of the greatest opportunities, which is sad in many ways, we have been ignoring women and their differences, and now is the opportunity, and our tools are actually ideally suited to help women stay healthy. 2/3 of the Alzheimer's disease population is made up of women. That is not because they live longer. That is primarily thought to be because of the changes that occur during menopause, the inflammatory, the oxidative stress, and if not managed correctly, will lead to women having Alzheimer's disease. We can follow on if there is hormone replacement therapy, and we can pick up most of the really female-associated cancers, plus those that they frequently have, like lung and colorectal. We also think we can be your partner in GLP-1 management. GLP-1s are the nirvana. They can do pretty much everything, but they do have side effects. They do have their downside. They can cause pancreatitis. They can cause affect gut motility that can lead to inflammation. They can cause muscle wasting. We can measure all of those, and we can measure some of the benefits. And I will say there is a paper that came out this week that it's epidemiological, but there does seem to be a higher rate of ovarian cancer in women that are taking the highest doses of GLP-1s. So the story is not over with GLP-1s, and we have to be monitoring our patients, but we can also help when the patient needs to get off. We can't stay on a drug forever. The other thing is it's a lot of information. 1,000 biomarkers. And how do you pore over that? How do you get through your day? You can't. So we've worked very hard to use our AI tools to make it much more actionable in a summation that you can read in 2 to 3 minutes prior to the consultation. We break things down in biological pathways so you can go down and understand the root cause. We are playing around with AI-assisted chatbots, which are really kind of creepy, but you get into that, it gets too real, it starts to turn off the individual. But I gotta say, it is amazing. You can ask this thing anything, and it gives you the correct answers now. And we do a lot of in-house training, and we support our practitioners throughout. So the other challenge when you take a very comprehensive test is that we're gonna find something. We typically do find something that people can work on, and that's good. But sometimes we find things that are really, with Diane, if we just focused on her cardiovascular issues, what we identified early on, she'd be dead now. So this comprehensive testing helps us monitor everything using the same blood test at the same time and picking up these things before they become irreparable. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate your coming and listening. I would also like to remind everybody that we are offering an opportunity to experience molecular U while we're here. There'll be blood draws tomorrow morning from 8 to 12 p.m. If you're interested, please register at our booth, which is just outside. Thank you for your time.